I'm a 55-year-old Imam, originally from a small village in Morocco. Life took a different turn when I moved to the United States 20 years ago, seeking better opportunities for my family and myself. Over the years, I've built a life here, eventually becoming the leader of a small mosque in Texas, where I've served my community for the past decade. Outwardly, everything about my life appeared to be in perfect order. My days were filled with prayers, sermons, and the responsibility of guiding others in faith. I had a loving wife and 3 children who I worked hard to provide for. But deep inside, I was struggling. It's not easy to admit, but I often felt like I was going through the motions, just fulfilling my duties as an imam. My prayers lacked the depth they once had, and my connection to God felt distant, like I was knocking on a door that no one was answering. I spent so much time meeting the needs of my congregation that I forgot to nurture my own soul. Faith was central to my life, but it had turned into a routine, a series of tasks and responsibilities, rather than a living, breathing connection with God. I felt like something was missing, though I couldn't quite name it. The emptiness weighed on me, even as I continued to guide others. I knew how to recite the words, teach the principles, and uphold the traditions, but I struggled to feel the presence of God in my own heart. This void became harder to ignore over time, but I pushed it aside, convincing myself that service to others was enough. Little did I know everything was about to change in ways I could never have imagined. It was March 10th, 2023, a day that started like any other but would change my life forever. I was on my way to the mosque, the morning sky slightly overcast but calm. I remember stopping at a traffic light when out of nowhere, a speeding car barreled toward me. The crash was deafening, and an intense pain shot through my body as everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in the world I knew. Instead, I found myself in an oppressive void, an overwhelming darkness that crushed my spirit. It wasn't silence, it was something far worse. It felt like I had been completely severed from God's presence. My soul ached in a way I can't describe. Then I saw a faint red light in the distance, and I was pulled toward it by an invisible force. What followed was a surreal and terrifying journey. I found myself at the edge of a vast chasm filled with fire and smoke, where I saw faces, some familiar, writhing in torment. The cries of regret and despair pierced my soul. That moment shattered me. I realized this wasn't just a dream or hallucination. It was a confrontation with truths I'd been avoiding my whole life. Then, in the distance, I saw a faint red light flickering. I didn't walk toward it. I had no body, no sense of movement. Yet I was being pulled, like my soul was being drawn by an unseen force. As I got closer, the silence gave way to a sound that shook me to my core. Screams, not heard with my ears, but echoing deep within me. They were cries of pain, regret, and despair, each one a testament to lives filled with missed chances, shallow beliefs, and wrong priorities. Eventually, I reached the edge of a vast chasm. Below me was a pit of fire, its flames rising and churning, filling the air with thick, choking smoke and the stench of sulfur. The sight alone was horrifying, but what shook me more were the faces I saw within the flames. People writhed in agony, some bound in chains, others tormented by grotesque, nightmarish creatures. Their forms were human but deformed, radiating an unspeakable malevolence. As I looked closer, the horror deepened. I began to recognize some of the faces. A man from my childhood, a neighbor who had come from a Christian family, turned his twisted face toward me and screamed, "I turned my back on God. I ignored him my whole life." His words cut through me like a blade. Then I saw a public figure I'd watched on television, a political leader known for his influence and power. His face was almost unrecognizable, contorted by terror and pain, but his cries were clear. I sacrificed everything for power and wealth. I destroyed lives, and now I'm here. Another face stopped me in my tracks, a world-famous icon, Muhammad Ali. His presence in this pit shocked me. I kept my faith superficial, he whispered. I spoke his name, but I never truly believed. That's why I'm here. And then I saw someone from the Islamic world, a figure of immense power and influence, Muammar Gaddafi. His eyes were wide with terror as he cried, "Power became my God. I forgot the true God, and now I'm here in this darkness." What I realized in that moment chilled me to my soul. This place wasn't just for those who rejected God outright. It was for those who carried shallow beliefs, who lived lives devoid of genuine devotion. They had spoken God's name, but never opened their hearts to Him. The screams grew louder, and a terrifying whisper rose from the abyss. "This is a place with no escape. Here, there is no hope." Fear engulfed me, and I felt the crushing weight of my own shortcomings. For the first time, I questioned everything I had believed and taught. My soul trembled as I stood on the edge of this abyss, wondering if I too would fall. As I stood trembling on the edge of the chasm, overwhelmed by the weight of my own fear and regret, I felt utterly lost. The screams from the abyss echoed in my soul, and I could feel my own shortcomings laid bare before me. My prayers, my sermons, my years of serving as an imam. Were they enough? Or had they all been hollow gestures lacking true devotion? In that moment, I felt as though I was unraveling, my very soul breaking apart under the weight of my own failures. And then suddenly the darkness shifted. A light began to glow, faint at first, then growing brighter and brighter until it pierced the void around me. It wasn't just any light, it was warm, radiant, and unlike anything I had ever seen. It wasn't blinding, yet it was so pure that it seemed to illuminate not just the space around me, but the deepest corners of my heart. Then I saw Him. Jesus Christ stood before me, His presence so overwhelming that I couldn't look away. He wasn't how I imagined from pictures or descriptions. He was clothed in light, His face radiating compassion and love, His eyes deep with mercy yet piercing in their truth. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. All I could do was feel. I expected judgment, condemnation even, but instead there was peace. He looked at me, not with anger or disappointment, but with a love so profound that it shook me to my core. "You are lost," He said gently, His voice like the calm after a storm. "You have spent your life in acts of worship, in leading others, and in striving to do good. But your heart has been distant." His words pierced through me like a blade, not to wound, but to open something I had long buried. As He spoke, images of my life began to appear around us like living memories. I saw myself leading prayers, delivering sermons, counseling people. At first, I felt a flicker of pride. Surely these were the things that counted. But as I watched, I began to see the truth. My prayers were hurried, spoken more out of obligation than longing. My sermons, though passionate, often came from a place of duty, not deep connection with God. And my counsel to others, while genuine, lacked the conviction of someone who truly felt the presence of the divine in his own life. Jesus' voice was soft but firm. "You have spoken my name and the name of God. But have you truly known us? Have you sought a relationship, or have you been content with rituals and appearances?" Tears streamed down my face. I wanted to defend myself, to explain that I had tried, that I had spent my life serving. But I couldn't, because deep down I knew He was right. My life had been filled with acts of faith, but my heart had remained guarded, afraid to fully surrender. And then He did something I didn't expect. He reached out and touched me. Not just my body, but my soul. In that touch, I felt an overwhelming flood of love, mercy, and forgiveness. It was as if every burden, every regret, every hidden flaw was being lifted. He wasn't condemning me. He was offering me a chance to change, to truly know God in a way I never had before. "You are loved," he said simply, "but you must choose. Will you continue on this path of shallow faith, or will you open your heart and truly seek the one who created you?" In that moment, I realized the depth of my emptiness and the immense love that was being offered to fill it. It was the kind of love I had been searching for my entire life, but had been too afraid to accept. My heart broke open, and I fell to my knees, not out of fear, but out of surrender. For the first time, I truly understood what it meant to be seen, known, and loved. As I knelt there, trembling and broken, Jesus reached out his hand and lifted me. It wasn't just my body he lifted. It felt like he was pulling me out of the deep pit of despair I had been trapped in for years, even before the accident. I don't know how to describe the sensation fully. His touch was gentle but powerful, filled with a love so overwhelming that it seemed to pour into the cracks of my soul, filling spaces I hadn't even realized were empty. For the first time, I felt seen. Not as an imam, not as someone who had spent decades in religious service, but as a human being, flawed, vulnerable, and deeply loved. There was no judgment in his eyes, only understanding. It was as though he knew every corner of my heart, every struggle, every doubt, and yet he loved me anyway. "God's love for you is endless," Jesus said, his voice calm but with a weight that resonated deep inside me. "You've spent your life trying to earn that love, but you've missed the truth. It's already yours. Always has been." I couldn't hold back my tears. I had spent years preaching about God's mercy and compassion, but I realized I had never truly allowed myself to experience it. My faith had been a structure, carefully built, but without a foundation. I had been going through the motions, filling my days with rituals and responsibilities, yet my heart remained untouched by the love I spoke of to others. Jesus then showed me something that I will never forget. It wasn't a vision exactly, it was more like a profound awareness. I saw how God's love worked, how it reached out to everyone, even those who had turned away. It wasn't something that could be earned through deeds or titles. It was a gift, freely given, waiting for us to accept it. "You've been living in fear," Jesus continued, his tone gentle but firm. "Fear of not being enough, fear of failure, fear of truly opening yourself to God. That fear has kept you from the peace you've been seeking." Peace. That word struck me like lightning. For years I had been yearning for it, searching for it in my prayers, my sermons, my daily acts of faith. But I had been looking in the wrong places, thinking I had to achieve it on my own. Jesus didn't just offer me peace. He showed me what it felt like. In that moment, the fear and emptiness that had weighed me down for so long melted away. It was replaced by a stillness, a quiet assurance that I was loved, forgiven, and given another chance. "You have a choice," Jesus said. "Go back and live differently. Let your faith be more than words and actions. Let it be a relationship, a connection, a way of truly knowing and walking with God." As he spoke, I felt a new purpose stirring within me, not born out of duty or obligation, but out of gratitude and love. I knew this was my second chance, a chance to live a life that wasn't just about appearances or rituals, but one rooted in true faith, in genuine connection with the Creator. When I opened my eyes again, back in the physical world, I was no longer the man I had been. The void inside me was gone, replaced by a peace and purpose I had never known. For the first time, I wasn't afraid. I was alive, and I was ready to truly live. When I woke up in the hospital, the world around me felt both familiar and new. The sterile smell, the hum of machines, the concerned faces of my family. It was all there. But inside me, everything had changed. I wasn't the same man who had climbed into the car that day. My heart, my faith, my understanding of life had been transformed. As I lay there, replaying the surreal experience of what I had seen and felt, I began to reflect deeply. For years, I had lived my faith outwardly. My prayers, sermons, and community work had been focused on fulfilling obligations and maintaining appearances. But now I understood that faith was never meant to be a checklist. It was supposed to be alive, flowing from the heart and anchored in love and grace. I couldn't ignore the presence of Jesus in that moment. His words, his compassion, and his truth echoed in my mind. I realized my faith had been missing something essential, a personal relationship with God. I had spent so much time preaching about God's greatness and mercy, but I hadn't truly opened my heart to experience it. I had been serving God with my mind and actions, but not with my soul. In those quiet moments of recovery, I started reading about Jesus' teachings. I wanted to understand more deeply who he was and what he stood for. The more I read, the more I was drawn to his message of love, forgiveness, and humility. It wasn't about rituals or outward displays. It was about the condition of the heart. This new understanding made me reevaluate my role as an imam. I wasn't called to simply lead prayers or deliver sermons. My role was to guide people toward a deeper connection with God, one rooted in love and grace, not fear or obligation. I knew this journey wouldn't be easy. It would require humility, courage, and a willingness to unlearn much of what I thought I knew. But I was ready. For the first time in years, my faith felt real, alive, and burning within me. I wasn't just going to live differently. I was going to believe differently. Life after the encounter felt like a completely new chapter, like I'd been given a fresh slate, a second chance. I couldn't just go back to the way things were. That experience, seeing Jesus and feeling the depth of his love and truth, had changed everything about how I understood faith, worship, and even life itself. The decision to step down as an imam wasn't easy, though it felt inevitable. For years, I had poured my energy into leading prayers and teaching the community, but I knew I couldn't continue in that role while my heart was on a new path. It wasn't about turning away from what I'd done, but stepping into what God was now calling me to. When I told the mosque leadership, they were shocked, confused, and in some cases, hurt. I understood. It wasn't just a career, it was a lifelong identity, but I had to follow where the truth was leading me. As I embraced Christianity, the change in my life wasn't just about theology, it was about the way I lived every single day. Worship transformed from routine rituals into heartfelt expressions of love and gratitude. I found myself praying not because I had to, but because I wanted to, because I couldn't help but pour out thanks to the God who had lifted me out of despair and shown me grace I didn't deserve. My relationship with my family deepened in ways I never imagined. At first, there were tough conversations. They didn't fully understand why I had made this decision, and some of them were hurt, even angry. But over time, they began to see the change in me. The peace I now carried, the way I loved them more deeply and openly than before. I stopped trying to control or lecture and started simply being present, listening, and loving them as God loves us. I also found myself drawn to serve others in new ways. It wasn't about duty anymore, but about sharing the love of Christ that had transformed me. I began speaking to people, not to preach at them, but to tell my story and how I'd found hope in the midst of emptiness. It amazed me how many people resonated with my struggles, even if their journeys were completely different. Every day, I wake up with a sense of purpose I've never known before. It's not always easy. There are still moments of doubt, challenges, and questions. But through it all, I hold on to the truth I experienced in that otherworldly moment. God's love is real. His grace is sufficient, and His presence fills the void no one else can. My life now is no longer about following rules or maintaining appearances. It's about walking in relationship with God and sharing His love wherever I can. After everything I experienced, I knew I couldn't keep this to myself. What Jesus revealed to me wasn't just for me, it was for others too. His love, His grace, His willingness to meet us at our lowest and transform our lives. It's a message the world desperately needs. My life's mission now is simple but profound: to share that love with anyone willing to listen. This mission isn't about standing on a stage or shouting my story for attention. It's about meeting people where they are, just as Jesus met me in my darkest hour. I've realized that so many people carry burdens of guilt, fear, or emptiness, just as I did for years. Some are stuck in religious routines, longing for something more but not knowing where to turn. Others feel too broken or unworthy to believe they could ever experience God's love. I want to tell them that there's hope, that God's grace is deeper than any failure, and His love is wide enough to encompass every person, no matter their past. Every conversation I have now feels like an opportunity to reflect His love. Sometimes it's with a stranger on the street, other times with someone who's lost their way spiritually. It's not about preaching or trying to convince people. It's about listening, caring, and sharing what I've found when the moment feels right. My words aren't always perfect, but that's the beauty of it. God works through our imperfections. Living this mission is also a daily journey for me. Each morning I start by praying, asking God to guide my steps and help me live in a way that reflects His love. I remind myself that this isn't about me, it's about Him. I also ask for the humility to keep growing, to repent when I fall short, and to let God refine me. His grace isn't just something I talk about, it's something I depend on every day. I've seen how God uses even small acts of kindness to make a difference. Sometimes it's a warm conversation with someone who's feeling unseen. Other times it's sharing my testimony with someone who's searching for answers. Every moment feels like an invitation to be part of His bigger plan. This mission has brought me a peace and purpose I never imagined. It's no longer about trying to be perfect or impressing anyone. It's about being authentic and letting God's love shine through my life. I know I'll face challenges, but I also know I'm not alone. The greatest joy for me is seeing others experience what I did. The freedom, the healing, the overwhelming sense of being loved by God. If my story can help someone else find their way to Him, then every step of this journey will have been worth it. My life is now a testament to the power of His love, and I'm committed to living every day for His glory.